Hey guys, welcome back to my workbench. Dan here as always. It is a gloomy, cold Sunday afternoon and it's the perfect day to stay inside and do some projects. And while I was working on projects today, I wanted to go ahead and put together another cool tip trick video for you guys while I'm here. And this one is going to be a really interesting, unique technique that I actually just recently learned. It was from a modeler named Jason Quinn. Most of you are probably familiar with his work. He does a lot of late 70s, early 80s chassis era rolling stock and locomotives, and his weathering is phenomenal. And he does a super nice fine dot rust technique, and that's what's going to be the topic of this video. Obviously, when we do a lot of fine brush work in our hobby, there's only limits with what we can actually do with, say, the finest fine tip brushes. One of the things that's always eaten at me is my inability to do very fine, tiny dot rust on a lot of my rolling stock, my covered hoppers, and other cars. And this is a technique that I was like completely baffled by. I didn't even think about it when he showed me this. But he had actually modeled a covered hopper, and I had asked how he got his dots so fine on this covered hopper, in particular his rust dots, right? And he actually explained to me how he uses a Micron fine tip pen. This is going to be the subject of this video, is one of these guys. Now I have a lot of these pens that I use for my various hobbies. I also have fine tip Sharpies, I have Jelly Roll ink pens, and I use a number of these things for graffiti. But one of the colors that you can commonly get is actually this dark brown color. And this is a perfect pen that you can use to do fine dot rust work. And let me go ahead and jump to the workbench so I can show you exactly what we're talking about. This is what we're going to be modeling. Notice how fine these rust dots are. These are super fine point, being that we're using a fine tip ink pen here, the Micron number 5, or 05 rather. And you can see, simply by taking these dots, I can just add some ink where I need to and then simply dry brush it, or wet brush it using a flat brush. Commonly using a brush technique, these are the levels of rust that I can get away with using a very fine tip brush. You can see I can still get some relatively fine dots, however they are limited with the amount of size. Going anything smaller than that is very difficult, especially on a larger project like, say, a covered hopper, a trash gondola, or any kind of piece of rolling stock where you're going to have a lot of these fine little dots, little scrapes and things like that. Using these pens is a great way to add a whole other level of detail to something like one of these cars, a boxcar, a covered hopper, or anything. And this technique can apply to model airplanes, model ships, not just trains. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the technique that I learned and how I apply it to my models using these pens. So I'm working on this Walther's sulfur car, and this is a prime example of the kind of fine rust dots that you'll see. A lot of times these tank cars get fine little dots all over the tank bodies, and they're very difficult to model using just a brush. And of course, with how fine they are, trying to dry brush them and get streaks out of them is 10 times more difficult, because most of the time, by the time you take any size brush to that fine of a dot, it'll completely obliterate it. Not with this technique. Using this fine tip pen, what we'll do is we'll zoom in first and watch how I come in here. I just want to have some random dots all over this tank body, right? So I can come in here and apply these dots just in random areas like this and just have them kind of scattered about. You can do some little patches just like this. Add them wherever you want. If you're using prototype photos like I am, I'm just trying to kind of get a rough positioning. At least what's on the prototype, I'm just trying to kind of match it up, right? So we get a little bit of a pattern here with our rust dots. And you can see these are super, super fine. Now you can leave it like this, but this next step will allow us to be able to streak it down. Now, you can do this with a dry brush. I, however, like to go in and just apply a little bit of moisture. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to dip my brush in just a little bit of water. I've only dipped this corner of the brush in water. You don't need much water here. And I'm going to go ahead and take it onto my mixing napkin. I actually need a little bit more water than that. And let me just go ahead and try to get most of that water out. So I just want to have damp bristles here. You don't want to have a soaking wet brush. Get that majority of moisture off the brush. And now we're ready to transfer it over to the model. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come in, light motion here, guys, very quickly. You don't want to work these in too much. Quick streak down. Quick streak down. quick streaks down. Just like that. Notice how fine all this rust is. But it accurately models the pitting and the fine rust that you normally see on a car like this or any other rail car where this is normally how these dots can form, and eventually these will turn into larger rust dots, but this is always the base bit of rust. But this is a fantastic technique that you can apply to larger rust dots to really complement your work. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this again, just because I'm having so much fun doing this. And this is literally so easy. I just come in here. You don't even need to have a steady hand. I have horribly unsteady hands, right? And I can just come in like this, maybe model a little gouge there, little streak along the top. Have fun with this. Just go in there, model some little patches. Now, come back in with the brush. Let's zoom out so you guys get a better shot here. Streak down, streak down, streak down, streak down, streak down. There we go. And just that fast, we've created this super nice fine rust dot technique, all with one pen. Now this is just one way I can use these pens. I have many more examples I could go into, but just for the sake of time on this video, I'll only show you a few more examples to give you guys a rough idea of just the various ways I can utilize these pens for my work. Our next example is this large scrap gondola, and with this car I've done a lot of brushwork to the sides here to replicate a lot of the dents and gouges on the sides. Now I can come in here with something like this Micron pen, and I can add some fine dots, maybe some fine scrapes, just into this work, just like this, to enhance it, to make it look a little bit more realistic, give it a little bit more depth, because obviously doing this kind of work with a fine tip brush is only going to get you so far. You're only going to be able to model so much with that brush. So, coming in here with a technique like this, I can get in here and apply all these little fine dots. I can do these little gouges and things like that, where that would be very difficult with using a regular brush. Some of this you can do with a regular brush, but it's very difficult. So you can see I can just come in here and just add all kinds of little effects relatively quickly. Just that fast, we added a whole other level of detail to our brushwork to enhance it, to improve it overall. We can also do some of the side scrapes commonly seen on things like covered hoppers or really any kind of rail car that might have some ribs on it. Oftentimes you'll see these scrapes. They get rust formed inside them, and over time it starts to rust away. Using this pen, I can go in here and very quickly add some very convincing rust streaks to the sides, make it look like there's some impact damage, for example. You can also do this on the sides of large Trinity covered hoppers, things like that, where you see a lot of side scrapes. This is an amazing kind of pen you can use for that kind of technique. I should mention I also don't just use the brown color to do rust. I can also use something like a black tip marker with the same tip size to do garbage juice stains or other little various stains on the sides of my rail cars. Again, referring to the side of the scrap gondola, I can come in here and model some very convincing stains very quickly by going down the side of the car like this, adding some of these dots like this. I could just add a bunch of splatter if I wanted to, but I'm just going to do a little bit just for the sake of this video. And again, I can come down with a wet brush. I can just go ahead and streak that down like that. And very quickly, I have some very convincing stains. And as you can see, they're amazingly fine. Very close to prototype in that sense where we can get in there and do some very fine detail, scale size, rust, or stains like that. For the last demonstration, I'm going to be using this Walthers NSC plastic pellet car, and this is just going to be the same basic approach as what we've been doing in this video. However, I'm not going to be streaking this rust down. I just want to add some little rust dots just to the surface of this car to replicate sort of what's there on the prototype that I've actually chosen to try to model here. What I'm just going to do is simply go down and I'm just going to add some of these little guys all over the side of the car. And I'm just wanting to model some of these little spots that start to form. Remember, all this old rust always starts off with the smaller little scratch or a smaller little pit like this, and then eventually it forms into a larger rust dot and it'll start to break down the side of the car. But a lot of times on these plain gray cars you see this kind of dot effect too. And this is something where you can also come back in. You can streak some of these down if you want. However, I just want to do some base rust pits for this example because I want to just have some of these dots. Remember, the dots are going to be a big thing on a lot of these cars because these are the kind of things that you're going to see on a prototype like this. But this pen is just a great way to come in here and effortlessly add some of these dots. And you can see you can get underneath the roof walk and you can just do this very, very fast. Not saying that you want to try to do this super fast, but I'm saying that if you're just trying to wrap the project up, this is a great way to just add some of these little dots, and you can do it relatively quickly once you get into the habit of just using your hand to just let the pen just kind of bounce a little bit on the surface. You're still maintaining a bit of control here, obviously, but you can go in there and just kind of let it dance around the surface if you want, and you can just create these wonderful little effects. And again, I'm not going to streak these down on my car, but you can if you want. Just use the technique that I showed you earlier. So obviously these are just a few examples of the amazing effects you can get with the simple Micron pen like this. And oftentimes they do sell these pens individually, but in order to get some of these, if you were to go to, say, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or any other craft store, oftentimes this particular pen is sold in a small pack, but you can honestly utilize all the colors that are available in the general pack. This comes in a pack of, I think, 6 markers. And they're all generally tip sizes I can use. I need to investigate too and see if these Micron pens come in different sizes as well. They might with this color, I'm not sure though, but honestly the .05 here works perfectly for just about any car. You can even use these in an N scale too. Okay guys, that'll wrap up this tip trick video for now. In the meantime, you guys can subscribe here for more content. Follow my work on Facebook and Instagram. My Facebook page is Daniel Arnold. My actual page is Dan's Custom Trains. And then on Instagram, I'm Dan E. Dankinson. It's all lowercase, and I'm always posting pictures and videos of projects I'm working on, so you guys can stay tuned to that if you would like. And like I said, subscribe here on YouTube for more content. I got some more helpful videos coming up here soon and some updates as well. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.